Most people think an execution is the final chapter in a long story. But what happened to Richard Barry Randolph in his last 6 minutes raised questions Florida wasn't ready to answer. After 35 years on death row, the state carried out its record-breaking 17th execution of the year. Yet the way Randolph spent his final hours, and the one thing he refused to say before the drugs hit his system, left a quiet tension inside that chamber that no one expected. And the truth behind why his final moments unfolded the way they did is far more unsettling than the official report admits.
Back in 1988, Richard Barry Randolph didn't look like someone who would end up on death row. At just 26, he'd finally caught a break after months of failed job applications. When he walked into the Handyway store in East Palatka, the manager, Minnie Ruth McCollum, saw a young man who just needed a chance. No family, no real home, no experience, yet he quickly became one of her most reliable employees. For a moment, it looked like his life was finally stabilizing. He even managed to rent a small place of his own. But behind that brief stretch of normalcy, something was already slipping, and nobody around him understood just how fast it was about to fall apart.
On the morning of August 15th, everything snapped. Randolph walked into the Handyway store with a toy gun, convinced it would be enough to scare his way into the safe. But when Ruth caught him in the act and realized the weapon wasn't real, the confrontation spiraled instantly. What happened next was a frantic struggle that left the store in chaos. Cameras yanked out of place, cables tossed into the trash, and signs of a fight everywhere. As Randolph rushed out wearing an employee shirt and locking the front door behind him, 3 women passing by noticed something was off. He told them Ruth's car had broken down and he was on his way to pick her up, but the mess inside the store said otherwise. Minutes later, deputies arrived and found Ruth barely clinging to life, and the hunt for Randolph began. By the time deputies stepped inside the store, it was clear they were dealing with more than a robbery gone wrong. Ruth was on the floor, barely conscious, struggling for air as paramedics rushed her to the hospital. While she fought for her life, Randolph was already miles away, trying to blend back into the world as if nothing had happened. He slipped into a grocery store in Jacksonville, attempting to borrow money and cash a stack of lottery tickets taken from the Handyway. It didn't take long for officers to track him down. When they brought him in, he directed them to the clothes he ditched during his escape and, not long after, gave a detailed confession. With that, the case against him was locked in place. Just days after the attack, everything was already pointing toward a conviction that would follow him for the next 3 decades. The trial moved quickly. In 1989, the jury heard how Randolph had fled, confessed, and left a trail of evidence that was impossible to dispute. He was found guilty of first-degree murder, robbery, assault, and theft, charges that stacked up into a future he couldn't escape. During the penalty phase, the jury split 8-4 in favor of the death sentence, and the judge accepted it without hesitation. The court listed 4 aggravators. The crime happened during an assault, it was meant to avoid being caught, it was tied to financial gain, and it was considered especially cruel. From that moment, Randolph's life narrowed to a small cell on death row. For the next 35 years, he filed petitions, appeals, and pleas for clemency, but every door closed just as fast as he opened it. As the years dragged on, Randolph's body broke down faster than his appeals. He developed systemic lupus, an autoimmune condition that attacked his organs and made even basic movement painful. Medical experts warned that Florida's 3-drug protocol could hit him harder than most, causing severe distress and a slow, suffocating end if his veins collapsed during the injection. His lawyers argued that this crossed the line into unconstitutional punishment, but the courts never weighed the claim on its merits. Instead, they dismissed it as too late, saying the paperwork should have been filed years earlier. And with that technicality, the state pushed forward. In October 2025, the governor signed the death warrant, setting a date that ended Randolph's decades-long fight in a single stroke. When execution day finally arrived, the prison woke long before sunrise. Randolph got up at 4 a.m., took a shower, and met with a spiritual advisor, the only visitor he had. He'd grown up without family, and he was leaving the world the same way. His final meal had been offered the night before, a double hamburger stacked with lettuce and tomato, fried onion rings, and a slice of cherry pie topped with whipped cream. After that, the hours passed quietly. No phone calls, no last-minute statements, just a man waiting in a silent cell as the clock moved toward 6 p.m., while outside the prison, nothing indicated that Florida was about to carry out its 17th execution of the year. At 5:50 p.m., Randolph was led to the execution chamber. Officials struggled for several minutes to place an IV line because of his weakened veins, a reminder of how much his body had deteriorated over the years. Once the drugs began flowing at 6 p.m., the process lasted about 6 minutes. He gasped, moved slightly, and grimaced, but remained silent with his eyes closed. When offered the chance to speak his final words, he said nothing. By 6:30 p.m., the state officially pronounced him dead. The room stayed dark except for the minimal light inside the chamber, and outside, there were no protests, no demonstrations, just the quiet finality of a life ended after decades of legal battles, illness, and isolation. Richard Barry Randolph's life ended the same way it had been lived for decades, quiet, isolated, and controlled by forces larger than himself. The crime that put him on death row shocked a small town, yet his final hours revealed another story, one of illness, relentless legal battles, and a system determined to finish what it started. 35 years of appeals, decades of suffering, and a last meal no one would remember. Was justice served, or did the state rush a man whose final moments were shaped as much by his failing health as by the crime he committed? The answer isn't simple, and the question lingers long after the chamber goes dark.